Bonjour French 1. Today's lesson includes 3 irregular verbs that you will need to memorize for this chapter. Irregular means that they don't follow a specific pattern like the ER verbs where you drop the ER and you add S, or the RE verbs where you drop the RE and you add SS, sh. They are irregular because they do not follow those patterns and you just have to memorize the various forms. Now the first one, faire, is one that we actually talked about on the last set of notes. It comes up a lot in this section because faire is the verb for to do, and you do a lot of the activities in the French language, like faire du surf, to do surfing, faire de la photo, to do photography. So in order to say things like I do photography or I do surfing, you have to know your forms of faire. So let's go ahead and work on jotting these down and memorizing that in order to say I do an activity, you say je fais. In order to say you do an activity, you say tu fais. In order to say he or she does an activity, il or elle fait. To say we do an activity, nous faisons. To say y'all do an activity, vous faites. And to say they do an activity, either ils or elles font. And again, one of the most common uses for this is telling what you're actually doing. So I give you the example below of je fais du vélo, which is either I'm doing some biking or I bike. They all kind of mean the same thing in French, just whether you're translating it word for word and trying to get a word for every French word that there is in the sentence, which you really shouldn't try to do because it just doesn't work that way. We know that English and French have different word orders and different numbers of words that they use for certain phrases, but if you're a stickler for it, that's how you can translate it. Or things like nous faisons du surf, which is we surf, or we are surfing, or we're doing some surfing, that kind of stuff. So this should look vaguely familiar to you. This next one, though, won't. The verb aller is the verb for to go. We're going to use it in this section because eventually we're going to learn some more places around town. As of now, you already know a few places like la piscine for the pool and the cinéma for the movie theater and things like that. But we're going to add to that list so that, again, one of the things you can talk about is not just what you like to do, but where you like to go, and eventually learn to invite somebody along to go with you. So aller is a pretty important verb. We're also eventually going to use it to talk about what we are going to do, as in the future tense. So this is a very important verb in this section. Today we're just going to start with memorizing the forms, but later on down the road you'll be using it in sentences to talk in tenses other than the present tense, which is something very new for my French 1 students. So first things first, jot down that aller means to go. Even though it ends in an ER, it is not an ER verb. Again, all of today's verbs are irregular. So go ahead and jot these down. We've got je vais for I go or I am going. Tu vas for you go or you are going. Il or elle va for he goes or she or she is going. Nous allons is we go or we are going. Vous allez is y'all go or y'all are going. And ils or elles vont is they go. Now the reason why the ugly boot is here is because there's actually 2 ways that I want to give you to help memorize this verb chart. The first thing I want you to think about is the boot. You know, when you draw your ugly boot and you encompass the je form, the tu form, the il form, and the ils forms. When you do that, you'll notice that all of the forms that are inside the boot are similar. In this case, they're similar because they basically all start with the letter V, whereas the 2 that are left outside of the boot, the nous and the vous form, are similar to themselves and different from the rest of the things that are inside the boot. In this case, they both start with ALL. So in order to keep yourself from getting in a habit of trying to make it like the nous or the vous form or trying to do V forms with all of them, one way that people memorize this verb is they remember that it's a boot verb and they know that everything inside the boot starts with the letter V, whereas the 2 that are left outside of the boot start with ALL. The other thing I want to point out is on the left-hand side here, when you go from ve to va, I know va and va sound the same, you drop a letter each time. So that sometimes helps people memorize which order it goes in on this side. You start with the biggest word, the 4-letter word, ve, V-A-I-S. To go down to the tu form, you get rid of the I and you just get va, V-A-S. And then to go down to the il and L form, you drop the S and get just va, V-A. It's not a rule, it's just something to notice, and if it helps you keep track and memorize it in your mind, then that's a great thing to think about. Again, you use the verb aller to talk about where you're going, so I gave you a couple examples down here. Je vais à la piscine would mean I'm going to the pool, or I go to the pool. And nous allons au cinéma would mean we are going to the movies or we go to the movies. So anytime you have a place and you want to talk about going there and you don't want to just say I like the pool, you can say je vais à la piscine instead of just j'aime la piscine. The last verb we need to talk about is the verb venir. Venir is also an irregular verb, meaning it doesn't follow a pattern. You just have to memorize it. The reason why this comes up in this chapter is it means to come, as in to come to a place and come along with somebody. We're going to be learning how to invite people along with us, and so we're going to say things like, are you coming along? Or I'm going to come with you to the movies and things like that. So coming and going in this chapter are pretty big deals. Venir will also eventually be used to talk about stuff in the past. To say, I just came from doing this, I just came from swimming, or I just came from gym class, or whatever it may be. So this will also come in handy when it comes to talking in the past tense. Lots of new tenses in this chapter. But first we just need to get the forms down because, again, it is irregular. So if you want to say, I'm coming along, you'll say, je viens. If you want to say, you're coming along, you'll say, tu viens. If you want to say, he or she is coming along, il or elle vient. All pronounced the same, but you can see the spelling difference on your screen. To say we are coming along, nous venons. To say y'all are coming along, vous venez. And to say they are coming along, ils or elles viennent, is how that's pronounced. No ENT pronunciation there. Again, you'll notice that this is a boot verb. The way you know it's a boot verb is because I'm telling you right now, but if you notice, that means that all the forms that are inside the boot have something in common, whereas the two that are left outside of the boot have something in common amongst themselves or betwixt themselves. The ones inside the boot here start with the letters V-I-E-N. Every single one of them starts with V-I-E-N, whereas the two that are left outside of the boot are just V-E-N. Is it a small little detail? Yes. If you remember the boot, though, will it help you remember that detail? Hopefully. So keep in mind that a lot of people like to memorize venir by remembering that it is indeed a boot verb and that all of the forms inside the boot start with V-I-E-N, whereas the two that are left outside of the boot start with just V-E-N. Again, you can use this to talk about where you are coming to or coming from. Je viens à la piscine avec toi is I'm coming to the pool with you. Nous venons au théâtre avec notre classe. We come to the theater with our class, as in the theater to see a play. So all of these verbs are really just at this point something that I want you to start working on memorizing the irregular forms. With faire, you already know some different activities that you can use it with, but with aller and venir, the use of those with the future and the past will come later on in the section. So it's a lot easier later on in the section if you already have the forms memorized, and then you can just work on using those forms in sentences to speak in the future and the past. So start working on memorizing these, and as always, bring these notes with you to class.